So we now have our basket ready with our 2 sets of whaling and our French randing in between. And we're ready for bordering. What I'd like to show you is how to kink these rods down ready for bordering. Some people like to kink the rods down as they border. I prefer to kink down right from the beginning. It's one less thing to worry about when I'm producing my basket. So I've taken a new fresh stick. I know everything is wrapped down to the right height. So what I'm going to do is to offer that stick up, and I'm now going to measure for my kink. What I need to think about is that this rod is going to fall back down behind other rods. So I'm going to need to have space to fit rods in underneath. So I don't want to kink too low, or else it will trap this rod inappropriately. I don't want to kink too high, or else it will stick out of my basket. So roughly the width of this and a half is where you want to kink. So if we suggest that this is something like 4mm wide, then we want to be kinking down 6mm up. So I'm going to take my stick and I'm going to cut my stick where I think that measurement should be. And if in doubt, I would always go a little bit higher. It's easier to disguise a little tiny gap under your border than fight it and try and get into that gap. The little bit of a curve on my willow just helps me to sit it into there. And I'm going to put my nail level with that before I kink down. I could also mark with a pen if I wanted to. But it just is literally a case of getting with your thumbnail or your knife. I'm in position. I'm going to move that out the way and I'm going to do a gentle kink down. Not all the way, just enough to give it an idea of where I want to be. I'm going to work round all of my basket, and I can keep an eye on the levels of those kinks as well as measuring. I've got 2 viewpoints. So we're going to go round, do all of the basket, and then we'll start the border. So we're going to drop the border now. The choice of border depends on the size of basket, the width of the border that you'd like, and also depends on how the willow's wanting to work. Sometimes you might do a behind 2 border, where you want a little bit more on the inside of the basket, or where your gaps and spaces are tight. Sometimes you might want an in front of 4 border, because it's working nicely in front of 4 and it gives you a good swoop. Sometimes in front of 5 works better. I want to show you on this basket what I'm going to choose, and my brain is saying at the moment in front of 4, behind 2, but we'll see how the willow's working with the first 4 stitches that we put in. So we're going to take the border in 4 distinct sections, and the first is just the laying down of the initial rods. So as I said, the determination of whether it's behind 1 or 2 is by this first willow. If I put that down behind 1, it feels like it's going to kink that. It doesn't feel like it's happy. If I put that behind 2, it sits quite nicely and quite happily. So the willow is telling me that it wants to sit behind 2. I take my next rod and I lay that behind 2 as well. And I'm working to my right. Take my next rod, lay that behind 2, and do the same with my 4th rod. You'll often see 3, 4, 5, 6 rod borders. It's determined by the amount that we're initially laying down. This is then going to travel behind that one. So what I want to do is to just see if it's comfy to do that. It's pulling a little bit, it's not quite happy. So if I laid down that 5th one, it would sit behind there. It wants to travel happily with that full flow, so I'm going to do a behind 2 in front of 5 border with this particular size of basket. But be determined by what your willow feels it wants to give you. What you don't want to do is to kink these rods. So if you are offering them up, just give them a cursory, gentle stroke. Don't hold on too hard here and just offer it in. So we've laid down our 5. I've got a peg on hand, just in case for any reason you do want to pause in what you're doing. It's great that the peg can just sit into there and will hold everything in place. Gives you a bit of breathing space if you do need to do something else, or you need to just review where everything's in place and just check everything in. The worst thing you can do with a border is to get everything out of step, so it is worth just stepping back, looking, checking that everything is behind 2, that we have got those initial 5 ready for them to get paired. So off we go. At all times we're keeping a thumb here. This thumb keeps everything level and everything flat. Without this thumb, these can ride up and we can get a false reading on where this might be kinked. So we've already got that kink in our basket. What we don't want to do is to double kink those. It just looks a bit awful. So we're giving it a bit of love. We're stroking it gently in order that it will go in front of 2 rods and behind this one. Be careful of this bit here. You don't want to suddenly pull it over. So it's like a big wing shape that we're going to do. Gently behind that rod. And I would give us plenty of space here. We can tighten later. What it's difficult to do is to pull back. So we're going to set that into position, and I'm always pushing gently back so it sits behind this rod. And you should find that it will hold itself in its position. So it's moved from the first position into the last position, and instead of saying as a single rod, it gets a friend from up at the top. And this friend works behind 2. Now when the friend lays down, it never lays down on top. It always lays down at the back of the other one, and again that thumb is keeping it flat. So we now have 1 pair and 4 singles, and I want these singles to end up in pairs. So we take the next one in front of 2, behind 1, push it to set it down, and we take one from the top to add into that pair. And we're looking at this, we're mindful of this, we want the same sort of swoop going off. They look rather large at the moment, but we can adjust later. What you obviously don't want is one massive one or one really pulled in. Again, give a little bit of love to this next rod, in front of 2, behind 1, push to set it into position, and give him a friend from here, and just twist slightly to sit that friend at the back, and you can see that they're sat flat. Last 2 to do, in front of 2, behind 1, that gentle push, and we take that one down to join it, and then to finish this section of the border, in front of 2, behind 1, and we take that one down to join it, and we can use our trusty peg just to put everything in place so that we can have another look at this, check these pairs, check that they're sitting in the right order, check that everything looks right from here. So now we're on to the third section of our border. We're just going to take our peg out, and obviously everything's held by our thumb. Currently we have 5 pairs working. We need to travel around the rest of the border. We need to lose some of these pairs and gain new pairs. When you have a look at them, you can actually tell which one is going to follow on. It's always the one on the right. The left one gets left behind. The right one runs off to find a new pair. And if you're not sure, if they've just twisted, have a quick visual. This one's always slightly thicker than this one. This one's usually longer as well because it's got to travel further. This one's already done some travelling. So the left one gets left behind. The right one goes in the same pattern in front of 2, behind 1, and gets a new friend. We still have 5 pairs, but this one's finished. We work the left hand of the 5 pairs, the left one gets left behind, the right one runs off to find another friend, and that friend comes from above. We're going to repeat that same movement round the rest of the basket, dropping a rod every time. And as I said before, it's really important that you keep an eye on what is happening with your border. So a constant check-in after you've done everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs working. These should all be singles. It's very easy to miss a pair or to take something from beforehand. It's also very easy to leave one of these upright. So after every stroke, have that quick visual. Does it look right? Does it not look right? Have I taken 2 from the bottom? Have I taken 2 from the top? And I'm just going to pause there, and then I can carry on around till I've got the last rod, and we'll see how to consolidate the last bit of the border. I just wanted to check in with you about a few problems that can go wrong with bordering. Often when you take this one, something could go wrong with this. It could strip, it could kink, or it could break. You've got the spare one. You can always use the left one if the right one isn't up for the job. And because you've left the border nice and wide, you can get in there with your secateurs and cut this really close, observing where it sits behind the upright stake, but you can cut the rubbish rod out the way and you can use the left one that you left behind. If both rods fail, then you could insert a new rod in between these two and trap it in by pushing it through the border on the same level, but hopefully it never gets to that stage. Conversely, if one of these fails you or breaks, what you can do is to just come back a little bit, come back a stage. You would cut that flush with the top of the wale, and then you would insert it on the left hand side, push it down. If your spaces weren't even, you might actually consider putting it on the right hand side to even up the spaces, but ideally it wants to go onto the left so that you're pulling against the original stake. So if there are any problems, don't worry, you can cut and reinsert the odd 1 or 2 into your border. So we're now coming up on the last bit of our border before we thread in. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rods still working. We're going to take the right hand side one and we're going to go in front of 2, behind 1. We still have an upright to work against, so we can put that into position. We need to imagine that this one is stuck up in the air. It's easy to forget this one. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go in front of 2, behind 1, and we're going to imagine that that is there, so we can come out the front edge of that, and we can add in the one from above. We've now got as far as we can, and we need to start threading these next rods in. Really, really crucial. Check those 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And hopefully we should have 2 left upright, and then we'll get on with the next bit of the border. So we're now on to the last section of threading our border. It's very difficult to actually have the camera in the right position to show you easily what's going off, and for me to be in a position where it's comfortable and easy for me to thread through. So what I have done is I've got rid of the table, and I'm actually working with this basket gripped between my thighs. This could be on a table with a weight in, and this area would be in front of you. But because we're filming, it is slightly to the side. So it will look a little bit funny as I'm working, but hopefully you'll get the gist. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs left, 2 uprights. We've just worked behind here, so the only option that I've got now is to start threading underneath. So I want to occupy the space here, which I've just put my bodkin in. And you remember we kinked down quite high earlier on. We've kinked down high because we want to occupy that space with 2 rods. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's this rod that wants to work into there. And the threading of the first rod is really, really awkward. And if you've got an extra pair of hands, great. And the extra pair of hands could do with keeping these 4 rods or 6 rods down and out of the way. So we're going to take the rod that we're going to thread. We're going to give it a little bit of love and a little bit of care. And we're just going to very gently explain to it that we're going to want it to curve. We take the tip of the rod and it comes from the inside of the basket to the outside of the basket. That seems a little bit weird. It really is, it feels better to be doing it that way, but that's not how we want to be doing it. It's from the inside to the outside. I've got plenty of space here, so hopefully you can see without the bodkin being in the way. We're trying to make the best use of this curve, but ideally this rod's going to come and stick out there. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it's not going to kink. But if it does, it'll give me the opportunity to show you how to sort that. So I'm going to gently thread through. It's kinked slightly here, but what I'm more worried about is where this flow is going to go. So before I do my last little sit into position, check back in with these and pull this one through. And that's sat nicely at the back of this knuckle. We need to follow that with a friend. We need to make this into a pair. We've still got 2 uprights, so one of them's got to be this upright here. It's very easy when we're at this stage for this all to ride very high. So make sure this is pressed down before you bend this into position. And this rod is going to sit at the back of this one. It's going to follow exactly in that line and come out of the gap here. Again, we just need to give a little bit of love just to this bit. We're asking it to do an awful lot to get into that space without kinking. So we're going to thread through. I think I've got enough room. I don't want to use the bodkin. And I'm going to hold my hand here so that I'm going to protect this. And it's a weird movement. I'm pulling back to then throw it forwards. And it's fairly quick. Okay. My next move is that I've got to get rid of this one. I count back my pairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know it's this one that's going next. I'm going to curve this piece here and I'm going to think about where it's going to sit. So if I look, this one hasn't got anything at the front of it, nor has this one, nor has this one hasn't, this one hasn't, and this one hasn't. So all of these are going to need to be threaded. But if we look back at this side of the basket, there's something in front of there. So all of these rods will occupy these spaces and form the rim of our basket. So it will come in front of 2. Imagine that is 1 upright, that is your 2nd upright, and it will come behind that 3rd one. So the position it's going to occupy is in front of here, under that one, and out of this side. And this is where your bodkin comes in. Some people like to insert inwards. They like to insert here. Some people like to insert here. I seem to prefer inserting in that position there. Be mindful that you can kink this rod there and you can lift this one too much. See which position works best for you. We don't want to have to thread a rod twice, so go very steady as to where they're going to go. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in front and behind. Now there will come a point where your bodkin will be in the way, and if you can see, my thighs are doing the gripping so that I can do that pulling with my hand. I need to remove the bodkin and then get that into the knuckle and pull that through. Nice and slowly and gently. Not too much because I want to maintain that curve there. And then this is my last one to go down. And this is where everybody goes wrong, is the positioning of this one. So it needs to go behind 2. It feels like it should go in and occupy the space there, but in actual fact it wants to go underneath that one and to occupy the space here. So again, we give it a bit of a stroke, and we're going to give it that movement. If we've got a forked end on here, I might get my secateurs, if they're to hand, and just cut that in order to give me a sharp point. If at any point none of them are going through very easily, just a nice little tip. And then we can put that into that space, and that will be sitting by the side of that other rod. I'm going to push that in gently, protect that edge as it goes in, nice and steady, and it sits into position next to that rod. We should then still have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All our rods from the top should be down, and we should have 5 spaces to occupy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're on the last bit of our basket, and this is the bit where we need to really take time and care. So if you're not in the right headspace, go and have a cup of tea. These last 5 rods all need to go down in sequence. So we're going to take this rod, the right hand rod of the left hand pair. This one is going to go and come in front of here, and because it's the first rod to go of the 5, it goes under 1. So it occupies this space in here. So I'm just going to gently get in there with my bodkin. Don't want to damage anything or split the rod. Go into there. Again, give it a little bit of love. It's not a particularly good rod, this one, so I just want to be very steady and careful with it as it comes through. I'm fully expecting that this is the one that's going to break, but it will give me the opportunity to show you how to resolve that if I need to. So again, we're pulling through. There's a point at which the bodkin comes out, and we pull nice and steadily. And I'm not worried that this is kinked or this is split here. As I say, I'm fully expecting this rod to be awkward, but I've got it in. It's going to get trimmed, so you're not going to see any of that. But it's nice that you see what happens and what can go wrong with a border. So we're now down to 4 pairs left. So we need to get rid of each one in turn. And again, check in that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces to occupy. Because it's the second one to go, it goes under 2. So it goes under the knuckle and it goes under the exterior one as well. So we come into here and we take it out to there. Left one gets left behind. The right one gets a little bit of love before I want it to travel into that space. I'm just going to turn the basket round slightly, just so I can get a slightly better grip. And again, pull it out. Because this is fresh willow, there is that likelihood of it skinning. So I'm just taking it steady. And here's a good point. Just check in where it's going. It doesn't want to sit on the back of this. It wants to sit at the front. So just as I'm putting that last bit in, giving it that little bit of extra love so it sits down there. So that one's finished with now, and we only have 3 pairs left to thread. And again, check in 1, 2, 3 spaces. So this one is going to come in front of there, and because it's the third one to go, it goes under the knuckle and under 2 others, which gives us 3 in total. And this one's just been a little bit awkward. What I don't want to do is to split through the rod. So I'm just taking a little bit of love and a bit of care. And I have split that rod, but no worries, I can just reinsert it. Again, that nice gentle curve. Thread it in. Don't worry about that kink because it's not in a position that we are going to worry about it. We'll just work through that kink. Take out our bodkin, and we're going to come into this space here. Oh, lovely, we've got a kinked one. Didn't really want a kinked one, but it does give me the opportunity to show you how to fix that. I don't really want to see that in my border. So I take my secateurs which seem to have disappeared. Please excuse me for a moment. Great to have an able assistant. So I know that this one is kinked and I'm going to cut it. What I don't really want to do is to mess about with the threading down here. So I'm going to cut it as close as I can and just pop it out. I now have this spare one. So I'm going to come back, pull it back. I can see into here, I can see where the upright is, and I can cut that off completely. I'm keeping my finger on it because I just want to remember that it was part of that pair. It's very easy to get lost when you're down to this single. It's slightly thinner than the others, but hopefully it will still do the job. So we're going to go in with our bodkin again, refresh where we were going to go in, just check back that it's the third one, and we're going to go into that space. And fingers crossed this one will want to behave a little bit nicer towards me. But it's always the way. I'm bordering quite late on in the day today, and the worst thing about basketry is that you often do the most intricate bit, or the bit that people see the most, last thing. Can you see here that I'm just going to adjust and pull that down so that it's in that space and it's at the front of that one. 2 more left to thread through, and hopefully checking in we've got 2 more spaces to fill. We're on the 4th one to go, so that wants to go under 4. So we've got the knuckle plus the 2 on the outside. And again, give it a little bit of love. And it may seem like I'm repeating myself, but it really is worth looking at the rhythm, looking at how this all moves, and maybe looking at this section of the video a number of times before you start bordering. And don't get that confident, oh, I'm nearly there, because that's when they'll start kinking. So very nicely, very gently, I'm adjusting my position and I'm supporting this bit. This is what the right hand is doing. Pulling with this, pushing and supporting with this one for it to sit in the correct position I want it. And just again a little bit of adjustment so that it sits level with this one. Breathe a bit of relief. Last one to go in. So hopefully we've just got one left, one set of pairs. It's going to occupy this space, and because it's the last one, it's the 5th one, then that's going to go under 5 rods. So 1 of the knuckle and 4 of the outside. And this is what happens if you are fairly tight with your kinking down. I've not got an awful lot of space in here. So I'm just going to very, very carefully find my way in here. But it proves that we're not all perfect. So my last rod, taken into here. Everybody's now gone quiet. We're all hoping that this one goes in okay. And hopefully we'll have a very beautiful basket very soon. Go on, little rod, tuck yourself in. And we can all breathe a big sigh of relief. So I've got my border all in. All I need to do now is to tighten the border and to trim off. So I've got all of my basket woven in perfect order, I hope. I'm double checking. I'm continually looking around here. Don't forget that there was the one where we had to cut back, so you'll end up with a bit of a gap. But the job now is to tighten and tension this border and to trim it off. We want a nice uniform border all the way around our basket. What we don't want is an additional bit sticking out. So we take a rod and we look at where that rod is coming, and we're just going to push that rod and pull at the same time. Move to the next rod, push and pull. Move to the next rod, push and pull, and so on. We can work round our basket and we can ensure that this is all even all the way round. So I'm just going to do that to the rest of the basket.